The results of the U.S. presidential election held on November 5th were revealed by yesterday, and Donald Trump was elected as president. 4 years ago, there was a time when this channel provided detailed information about the 2020 presidential election between Trump and Biden. At the time, the criminal acts of Democrats Obama and Clinton, as well as the criminal acts of various celebrities who supported the Democratic Party, were becoming publicized as conspiracy theories in relation to Donald Trump. In fact, although Obama was a highly likable president, it was during his time as president that many wars and assassinations occurred frequently. And it was revealed in an accusation by Ukrainian prosecutors that Biden, who was vice president during the Obama administration, had corrupt relations with the Ukrainian government, and the video is still available on my channel. However, the original English video has been censored and is no longer viewable. Then, during the Trump presidency, the United States entered a period of ceasefire and, in fact, no new wars. Also, it is true that if you upload an article or video on Twitter or YouTube that supports President Trump or accuses of election fraud at the time, your account will be banned. It is also true that there was censorship. In other words, America's major social media companies such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Google somehow supported the Democratic Party and were certainly preventing Trump from becoming president. Furthermore, in the 2020 presidential election, there was a lot of evidence of clear election fraud, and information accusing it was also being spread. And if you spread that information on YouTube, it would also be subject to censorship, and in the worst-case scenario, the channel would be banned. In addition, Twitter even went so far as to freeze Trump's account at the time. This is clear suppression of speech. This situation was considered an important issue for Republican lawmakers, and in fact, top executives such as Facebook's Zuckerberg and Twitter's Dorsey were invited to a congressional committee in question. Also, Twitter was later acquired by Elon Musk, and by the time the 2024 election began, it had become a free platform with virtually no censorship. Such biased reporting was evident on social media, but the situation in the mass media was even worse. In the American mass media, all mainstream media such as CNN supported the Democratic Party, and only Fox was relatively pro-Trump. I believe this will be the same in the 2024 election. I think everyone was well aware that all mass media in Japan supported the Democratic Party. In the American presidential election, Trump's election was prevented by every possible means, and in the end, in the 2020 election, Dominion's fraudulent election machine was introduced, and Grandpa Biden was elected as the new president. For people in the QAnon and conspiracy theory circles, including myself, who were excited about President Trump's savior theory, this result was so shocking that it was like a nightmare. However, after that, the old man Biden was completely different from previous presidents, devoid of dignity, just a comedy-like appearance like a dull old man, and he even cheated the election and won. I have come to feel that the existence of the Democratic Party in the political and election wars themselves are nothing more than a spectacle. And in the first place, the events of 2020 occurred when Donald Trump was president, and at that time, something called Operation Warp Speed was carried out in the United States, and the same items were scattered all over the United States. When that event happened, Trump was participating in it as president. The same was true for Russia's Putin, who was president at the same time. The only person who stood out was President Lukashenko of Belarus. There must have been many viewers who felt uncomfortable with Trump's words and actions at that time. Then for 4 years, Grandpa Biden's administration continued, and during that time, a war with Russia broke out in Ukraine, with which the real Biden had close ties due to corruption and other issues. Also, when the current presidential election began, there was an attempted incident involving President Trump. But as I mentioned in a previous video, this must be a farce. This year's U.S. presidential election was not the same as the last time when there was a lot of conspiracy theories, at least not in Japan. There were no QAnon, Yamato Q, Trump-who people, or people who were spreading strange videos of Trump. This is because it is purely entertainment based on Trump-centered conspiracy theories and has reached its expiration date, and the organizations that provide such entertainment and guidance do not have enough budget left. It's possible. At least in Japan's SNS, I feel that the number of SNS operatives, which used to be a ridiculous number, has decreased dramatically. And in Japan, Trump won this election without getting that much excitement or attention. After the victory, there was a scene where everyone from the Trump theater group greeted each other on stage during the speech. I honestly think that the results of this election, in which Trump became president, were good. However, I don't think Trump will save the world or anything like that. However, I believe that the war in Ukraine will end. This is not because the war in Ukraine will end because Trump becomes president, but because I believe that Trump has been brought in to play a role in ending the war in Ukraine. Inflation, rising prices, and rising stock prices are currently occurring all over the world. It is said that there is no money in the dark organizations, but for some reason, money is circulating in the market. Inflation and high prices are occurring because so much money is circulating in America, Russia, Europe, etc. This is very simple economics. I think the first sign that this money was being provided was the compensation of American income at the time of that event in 2020. I remember that at that time, about $3,000 per month was distributed, and Trump was the president at that time. If we hand out $3,000 a month to each citizen, it is obvious that inflation will occur. And there seems to be a situation where there is a war in Ukraine and a lot of Western weapons are being sold to Ukraine. The sale of these weapons is a special demand for the so-called American military-industrial complex, and a large amount of money is being printed and distributed. And Japan is contributing a large amount of money to Ukraine to buy weapons. It is still fresh in my memory that Prime Minister Kishida, who had been raising taxes a lot, for some reason gave an incredible amount of aid to countries such as Ukraine. I thought this was some sort of outrageous amount, but it must be that an outrageous amount of yen was printed and flowed out of the country. By having people buy weapons with that money, the amount of money in circulation in the United States skyrocketed, and it is thought that the inflationary situation caused by the dissemination of money that began during the Trump administration continued. As the supply of the Japanese yen continued to increase, the relative value of the yen declined, and the yen depreciated to an unprecedented level of 160 yen to the dollar. Furthermore, as the prices of imported goods have increased due to the weaker yen, Japan has also experienced rising prices and inflation. From the perspective of money, the purpose of the events of 2020 and the war between Russia and Ukraine was to increase the world's money supply and cause inflation in the first place. I believe that the purpose of these events was to circulate currency around the world to the extent that a bubble economy occurred. Due to the war, imports from Western countries, which had been commonplace in Russia, have come to a halt. Many Japanese and other Western companies, including Uniqlo, Toyota, and Nissan, quickly withdrew and ceased economic activities in Russia. Russians and Russian companies are also finding it difficult to continue their economic activities in the West. This seems to be creating a forced block economy for Russia, and domestic consumption, which had previously relied on imported goods, has suddenly shifted to domestic products. In terms of the tourism industry, the money that had previously been wasted on foreign travel has now been shifted to domestic travel, which has enriched the domestic tourism industry. The war forced money into circulation within Russia, and it is thought that so-called war special demand is occurring in Russia as well, due to war costs and weapons costs. As a result, as I mentioned the other day, the real estate market is booming, real estate prices are rising, and real estate rental prices are also rising considerably. And the Russian government promoted loans for real estate purchases that made it easier for ordinary citizens to acquire real estate. And as a result, interest rates continued to rise at an incredible rate. In the previous video, I mentioned that the current highest interest rate for term deposits is 21%, but when I look at my bank's app now, I see a figure of 24%. This is a situation in which, at the will of the Russian government, a tremendous amount of rubles are being distributed on the Russian market. This leads to inflation and high prices. In addition, salaries in the Russian government and companies have increased significantly in recent years. I recently spoke to a Japanese company expatriate I know who lives in Moscow, and he told me that with the same salary as before, he could not afford to go out to eat frequently, and before he knew it, life in Moscow became difficult. It meant that prices were rising. Trump becoming president seems to mean that the war in Ukraine will end. But when this war ends, the excess cash supply will suddenly stop in both the United States and Russia. As Russia begins to rebuild its economic relationship with the West, resources, mainly natural gas and oil, will suddenly be supplied to Western countries. Due to this restriction on imports from Russia, electricity and gasoline costs were skyrocketing, especially in Europe. This supply restriction has also been a cause of high prices around the world. Conversely, the flow of goods and people from the West to Russia will resume. This foreshadows the end of inflation, high prices, and high interest rates around the world. This can lead to economic collapse, economic downturn, and destruction of national currencies. Moreover, such an imbalance in the flow of money could lead to another war. New President Trump is said to be in favor of Israel attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. There is a possibility that the United States will decide not to use its military forces in response to China's invasion of Taiwan, but Trump has been taking harsh measures against China for some time. It appears to be influenced by the structure of the Democratic Party's ties to China. Trump is also expected to impose high tariffs on imports from overseas, including China, and imports from Japan as well. There is speculation that if Kamala Harris had become president, China, a close friend, would have felt comfortable going to war against Taiwan. But with Trump becoming president, there is also a scenario in which China would go to war against Taiwan. It seems like that. In any case, if these scenarios are essential for the flow of money, a scenario that suits Trump's characteristics will be created, and it will actually occur. Prior to that, certain kinds of bait had already been fed to the general public. For example, in the United States, when Trump lost due to election fraud, in the end, Trump and his lawyers uniformly said, China. They even talk about the threat of the Communist Party. And even here in Japan, the bait of indiscriminate bashing of Chinese people is being spread. Listening to Trump's presidential election victory speech, it is clear that he is playing a role in boosting patriotism and encouraging each and every citizen to fight for America. For better or for worse, and in a rather negative sense, Trump seems to be playing a role in incorporating humanity into this illusion of war. I'm still being slandered by some pretty crazy patriot-style conflict and war mentality people who still can't understand that they're being controlled by a war mentality. I am reaffirming that the most important thing is for us to always be conscious and never be provoked. Without fear or anxiety, let's at least refrain from participating in incitement to criticize fellow citizens based on their nationality or skin color. If we can, we should do good work and show love to our fellow citizens, whether they be Americans, Japanese, Russians, Ukrainians, Chinese, Koreans, or Europeans. Nothing matters. Furthermore, it doesn't matter whether the animal is a cow, pig, chicken, dog, cat, fish, or any species. However, no matter what nationality or skin color, species, we cannot accept those who exploit or those who are exploited. Creating a world free of exploitation should be essential in the creation of a new earth.
時を超える海風、潮とむくろの波、今私の間をすり抜けては嘆く、うつろな瞳並ぶ鉄格子の国、傲慢と裏切りを諦めで潰した愛と綺麗に飾ってどれだけの命詰めばやがて気づくのでしょうか。血みどろの叫びすらも檻の向こうに隠 して砕いてちぎって罪深き人の闇果て知らぬ欲は自己矛盾の声さえ雑音と捉える冷酷な作業のようにどれだけの涙飲めば世界は変わるのでしょうか。ほんのひとさじだけの甘さにいつまでも勝てない従うばかりで心の安寧と言い訳の山見つめても今も続く残虐に険さしのべられずどれだけの命詰めばやがて気づくのでしょう